Hello everyone, welcome back to our GRE series. My name is Eliandi. I'm an GRE instructor here at the International Scholars Program. Today we'll be looking at reading comprehension, which is part of the verbal reasoning section of the GRE. Specifically, we'll be looking at tips and strategies you can use to improve your performance in this part of the GRE. So we'll start with the introduction of what we'll be tackling today. So the first thing we should know is that the GRE basically tests how you think and not what you know. This is critical to know because many think that just by improving their vocabulary or by practicing as many questions as they can, they will be able to improve their overall performance. But that is not necessarily the best strategy to use, because if the GRE is testing how you think, then you should also know how the GRE sets up its questions. You should improve your logical thinking, and you should also improve your speed. Yes. And also mastering the reading comprehension section of the GRE is important because these questions will give you about half of the marks in the verbal reasoning section. That is about 50% of your verbal marks will come from reading comprehension. So if you want to pass the verbal reasoning section of the GRE, you must improve your performance in these questions. And also you need to know that mere practice is not enough. That is, you should not begin your GRE study by jumping right into the questions and practicing them. Because what if, for example, you are practicing the wrong things? How will you improve if you cannot tell, for example, how you should practice or what you should do? And that brings us to the point of this session today. We want to learn what you should master before you start practicing. A certain instructor put it this way. Imagine you are trying to learn a new sport, let's say for an example, golf. Then the first thing you do is to pick up the ball and the club and start practicing your swings or shots. You won't get far if you don't know, for example, how you need to stand, how you need to bend, how you need to hold the club, and so on. Because if you are just focused on practice, you might find yourself practicing the wrong posture and the wrong swings for a very long time. And practicing the wrong thing for a long time will cement that bad practice in your habits. And in the end, it might even be difficult to undo these things. So just like that example in the GRE, know what is right first and then start practicing it. So the first tip we need to look at here is that you need to master fast reading. Remember, the GRE is a timed test. And for reading comprehension, it's like you have less than 2 minutes per question. So you need to practice fast reading so that you can read the passages very fast and then answer the questions that follow. Now, reading is one of those skills that to get better on, you have to do them. What am I saying? To improve your reading speed, you have to read. There's no shortcut for this. So read. Read every day. And because we are talking about the GRE, it means you should be reading the type of text or the kind of passages you are likely to find in the test itself. So according to ETS, that is the makers and examiners of GRE, the GRE passages come from different reading materials. For example, they pick feature articles from international publications like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. They also pick text from trade books written by experts, especially those targeted at the general population. Then they also pick these passages from periodicals like the Scientific American, the Economist, and the London Review of Books. Or if you do not have access to this type of materials, just practice with the passages you have in the official guide, including the past ones, or passages you can find in past GRE mocks, that is the official mocks, or other guides. So ensure during your GRE practice that you are reading at the very least one passage per day. Taking 10 minutes per day to read these passages during your practice will improve your reading speed. You might not even notice that your speed is improving, but at the end of your GRE study, that is when you are just nearing your exam date, the improvement is guaranteed to be noticeable. So master fast reading by reading every day, and read the type of materials you are likely to find in the GRE test. That is our first tip. Now, the second tip is that you need to understand the types and structure of reading comprehension questions. Yes, understand the types of questions you are likely to find in the GRE, because that will also help you to improve your practice, because you'll be practicing for things you understand. Now, according to ETS again, reading comprehension questions fall in 4 basic categories. So for the first, we have questions that test your ability to understand the basic information given in the passage. So an example, so this one again tests your basic understanding of information in the passage. Understanding of basic information. So an example of this question is a question asking you to give the meaning of a word as used in the passage. Then we also have questions that require you to find information that is not expressly mentioned in the passage, but can be inferred from the passage. So inference questions. Then we also have questions that require you to evaluate the logic of the passage. For example, here you may be asked to evaluate why the passage or the author has put some highlighted section in the passage. So here, evaluation of logic, of passage logic. Then, lastly, you may also find questions that test your understanding of passage organization. So for example, here, a question may require you to identify the use of a specific paragraph. For example, identify the use of the last or first paragraph. Now, for many questions, the answer should come from the passage. That is, the answer should be something expressly stated in the passage. The exception is inference type of questions where you are expected to use the information in the passage to come to a logical conclusion. But for all the others, you must base your answer on things that are expressly mentioned in the passage. So understand the types and structure of the questions to help you practice for what you know. That is very critical. Because if you don't understand the questions you'll be facing and you are practicing, that is almost the same as blind practice. And blind practice won't lead you anywhere significant.
You are watching Success with Bob Mwiti Show, presented to you by the Kenya Airlift Program. The Kenya Airlift Program is an award-winning education financing scheme that helps bright Kenyan students to pursue graduate studies in North America, regardless of their financial background. You can find our programs by going to www.kenyaairliftprogram.com. The Kenya Airlift Program, empowering dreams.
Then let's look at tip 3. That is, practice active reading. So active reading basically means you are engaging with the passage while reading. So engage with the text or information. So passive reading, we can contrast this maybe for the purposes of understanding. We can contrast this with, passive reading and active. So for active reading, you have to interact or engage with the information. That is, you read with a purpose. But for passive reading, you are reading just to get to the end of the text or passage. So passive reading will not help you in the GRE. You need to practice active reading so that you can only read the passage once and answer the subsequent questions. If you go for passive reading, on the other hand, you might find yourself having to reread the passage again and again to understand it and to answer the questions that follow. So how do we practice active reading? Well, these questions can help us understand how to engage with the passage. For example, you need to ask yourself when reading the passage, what is the main point of this passage? Yes. Why is the author writing this? Why was the passage written? That is basically, what is the whole point of writing this thing? And this will be the main idea. This will be the overall idea that you can get just by reading the passage without delving into its specific parts. So that is something by the end of the passage, by the end of the first reading, you should be able to tell what it is talking about. Then ask yourself again, what is the main point of this paragraph? So this question will keep you focused on each paragraph. Because if you're not careful, if you're not doing active reading, you'll find that you are focused on the first paragraph. By the second paragraph, your mind has wandered off. By the third paragraph, you don't even know what you are reading in the first place. So to keep you focused on each paragraph, focused on each section of the passage, Approach each paragraph with this question in mind. What is the main point of this paragraph? Why was this paragraph written? Which idea do I need to come out with after reading this paragraph? Now that will keep you focused on the passage, paragraph by paragraph until the end. Then also get some rough idea of the tone of the passage. Most passages are neutral in the GRE, but some are negative, some are positive, some are celebratory. So just get a rough idea of the tone. And then if you find an example in the passage, ask yourself, what is this example? What role is this example playing in this passage? Why did the author have to include this example? So if you keep these things at the back of your mind while reading the passage, you'll find yourself actively engaging with it. And by the end of it all, you will understand much more than you would if you are only reading the passage passively. Now, this may seem like a lot of work, but it is possible, and it is what you need to do to reduce the number of times you have to read a passage for you to understand it and answer the questions that follow. And again, it's not that difficult a thing to master because you don't have to bother with the tiny details. That is, active reading does not mean that you have to understand each and every sentence and vocabulary. The details don't bother with. And by details, I mean things like technical terms used in the passage, for example. Yes, unless you will get it, you'll get a question touching on a technical term in the passage, you don't have to understand each and every word used in the passage for you to practice active reading. So away from active reading, another thing is to try and remain focused in the passage. Now, this is a problem for many GRE students or those who are preparing for this standardized test, because we find that many of these passages are, we call them dense. Yes, they are a bit technical to many people. And to some extent, they might be boring. Some of the passages are not things you would ordinarily want to read, were it not for the exam. So if something is boring, you might find yourself wandering away from it. Your mind might wander. And then unfortunately, if your mind wanders and you don't understand something, you might be forced to reread the passage, and that will be wasted minutes. So find a way to stay focused in the moment. So whatever works for you to keep you focused on the passage, practice it. Now, some people have have a good outcome by using this tip. That is, they imagine that after reading that passage, they will have to explain it to another passage. So for example, before starting to read a passage, pretend that after reading it, you'll have to explain whatever it is in class, or you'll have to explain it to your best friend. after only reading it once. Now, if you put yourself in that mind frame, you'll be forced to focus on it so that at the end of the reading, you can explain it, because you can only explain something that you understand. Then, to come to our last step, read the entire passage. Read the whole thing. Now, this might not seem as such a big deal to mention when mentioning strategies and tips for reading comprehension questions, but it is, because there are a lot of gimmicks out there, tips and tricks that are misleading. For example, some people say that you only need to read the first and last paragraph. Yes, but this is wrong. What if you only read the first and the last paragraph, and a question touches on something that is on a paragraph you did not read? Take an example, for example, of a passage consisting of 5 paragraphs. Then you read only the first, and the last. That means you have 3 remaining paragraphs. So in this case, if you find a question touching on one of the paragraphs, you won't even know where the answer to that question is. That means you'll have to come back and read paragraph 2, 3, and 4. And that would be a waste of time. Some people also say that you only need to read the first sentence, of a paragraph. That you only need to read the first sentence. Some take it a step further by saying you need to read the first and the last sentence of each paragraph. All these gimmicks will not help, especially if you are competing with the time, which will be the case in the exam. It might seem like you are saving time by reading only certain passages or certain sections of the passage or certain sections of each paragraph. But in real sense, you only save time if you read the entire passage once and then go to the questions. Of course, you can come back to the passage for a specific question. For example, if a question asks for the meaning of a word as used in the passage, then it makes sense that you'll come back to the passage to answer that question. But in this case, you will only come back to that specific part of the passage where that word is used. You won't have to read the entire passage again. So basically, these are some of the strategies that will help you to master reading comprehension in the GRE. That is, 1, read fast. Practice fast reading. 2, understand the questions. 3, practice active reading. Yes, then 4, stay, 4, stay, 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 And lastly, read the whole thing and avoid gimmicks. Read entire passage. So ensure you keep these things in mind and practice them when doing your reading comprehension practice. If you are consistent with these strategies and you are consistent with your studies, then without a doubt, you will improve your performance in reading comprehension questions. So that brings us to the end of our session today. I hope you have learned something that will help you to improve your performance in the GRE. Bye and welcome again next time.